What's going on, y'all? Robert Sykes, KetoSavage.com, and today I've got special guest Marcus Aurelius Anderson back on the podcast. We just completed David Goggins' 4x4x48 challenge, so this podcast dives into all that we learned throughout that process. We dive into a whole bunch of other growth mindset philosophies and principles. Always a pleasure chatting with him. I always level up after talking with him. I've got no doubt that you will take something positive from this conversation. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast with my good friend, Marcus Aurelius Anderson. And we are live. Marcus Aurelius Anderson in the building, coming at you, depleted, tired, and worn out. How are you, man?
I'm great, man. I know you're depleted, tired, and worn out as well, but here we are, and we're stronger for it, right?
That's right. So for anybody that does not know, we just got done doing the David Goggins 4x4x48 challenge. Define that for us real quick.
So Goggins created that 3 years ago, and the idea was to run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours straight to really push you and see what your body was capable of. Very much has the sleep deprivation built into it, very much like the military. Lots of times we can't dictate the environment or the time frame, but we still have to act. And so this is a really good way for us to, it's a good gut check for sure. And then it also shows you what else you're capable of on those days, like we were talking about when, I don't feel like working out, or I don't feel like doing this second set of cardio. When you've done 6 sets of runs, 4 mile runs in a day, and we actually did, because of you, we did an extra 2 miles, so we got 50 miles in.
I didn't know that this is he made this 3 years ago. I thought last year was the first one.
No, the year before. Last year was the first year that I did it, but it had happened the year before. But I was sort of aware of it, but I didn't know what it really entailed. Gotcha.
I want to dive deep into like our protocol, what we did, what we learned from that, et cetera, but I want to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself. You've been on the podcast once or twice before. Yes. So people should definitely go tune in and listen to those episodes. But for those that have not, what's kind of like a quick biopsy of you, not biopsy, but quick bio of you, I guess.
Quick bio of me.
Yeah.
The snapshot is I'm a TEDx speaker, best-selling author of the book, The Gift of Adversity. I have a podcast, which you've been on a couple of times, called Octa Non Verba. It's Latin for deeds, not words, which is why we're doing what we're doing. And then I'm also an executive and mindset coach to leaders, CEOs, and other entrepreneurs. And that's what I do.
And you and I met each other, I think 2017, 2018, something like that.
I think it was late 17, maybe early 18.
Weird story as to how we met. My barber, who is kind of out there, this is like an old barber, and she recommended I get in touch with you because she was following your stuff on Facebook or something like that. So we had like a 3-way call. She was trying to like sell us both on something, I think. Right. And we didn't really like what she was selling, but we liked each other. So we just continued the conversation after she got off the line. And then next thing you know, you're on my podcast, I'm on your podcast, and here we are running 50 miles together. So pretty cool how that works out in small world, kind of for the better. But we've never done, you and I both have talked at length about mindset, acting instead of just talking, but we've never actually done anything that was physically or mentally strenuous in tandem until this event, which was pretty cool because we knew we were both capable of doing this. Last year when you did it, I did not because I was traveling or at a conference or something. I don't remember what the deal was. But this year we jumped on it and we did it in person. So we had, you came out here on Friday. The runs started at 10 p.m., which was the same time Goggins was starting the runs.
Yes.
But we wanted to make, we couldn't just do 48 miles. 48 miles, I mean, that's impressive and all, but 50 miles is much more noteworthy.
It's a nice round number.
Yeah. So we ran 2 miles before it all started. And then at 10 p.m. on Friday, we started the official 4x4x48. And we started the first 3 stints that we did on the pavement?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, so the first, it was dark, obviously, starting at 10 p.m. So we wanted to do, there's a battlefield, Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park. They've got like a 1 mile loop, so we did that 4 times for the first 3 stints. And those paved roads, like my feet, I don't know about your feet, but my feet were freaking feeling it after just those. Yeah. So we did that, and then we'd come back after each stint. We'd take a shower. We'd get a little food in if we were feeling it, and little food being like a hard-boiled egg, a piece of keto brick, and a sausage or something. We pre-prepped a bunch of kielbasa sausages. We'd try and go get some sleep for an hour and a half or so, and then we'd wake up at 2, do it again, and then at 6, do it again. and then at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 6 p.m., 10 p.m., and just repeat. At what point did you start to like go internal, you know?
Usually for me, the internal part was around 2 a.m. that second day, Sunday morning, 2 a.m. Because our body's used to sleeping at night. That's circadian rhythm. And so the 10 p.m. run was, you could push through it. But then when you woke up, we had to wake up at 1:30 to be ready. And it was just like, that's when you start actually feeling everything. And it's just like, okay, got to lean into this thing, you know? And it was interesting that you were saying that, was it
my Aura ring?
Your Aura ring was saying that during the night runs, you were actually sleeping, which was interesting.
I think it was my, sleeping. I don't know if it was my watch or my ring, but one of them was definitely off because it was saying that I was sleeping. I guess it was my ring that was saying that I was sleeping when I was running, which couldn't be farther from the truth because I was definitely not sleeping.
The heart rate was up there, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's interesting because we were doing like polyphasic sleep the whole way through. So we would try and sleep for an hour and a half and then recharge, get our feet elevated, improve the blood flow, and then do it all over again. And I don't know about you, but I've got terrible feet. So my feet, I'm super flat-footed, overpronated. Like everything that could go wrong with a foot, I've got that in my feet rather. So I was feeling it after, the first few miles, because I run a mile every day, but I don't run 4 miles at a time ever. So doing that multiple times throughout the course of 48 hours was interesting to say the least. But you seem to be holding up pretty well. Like your joints and ankles and everything seem to be pretty solid.
They did, and I'll give you this. Last year I ran it alone on flat ground, and I did it fasted. And as you saw, running, we really don't need that much food for whatever reason. Maybe it's a different energy source because it's more aerobic than anaerobic,
because we fasted all Sunday.
We did, and it was pretty easy.
Yeah.
Especially when you're thinking about, okay, I can either get some food or I can lay down for an extra 10 minutes. And at that point, sleep is important. But I did it on my own in Tulsa on flat ground. So when I get here, Robert's like, hey, let's run both of these, get 1 mile on each of these paths to see what it's like. And he takes me out there, and you've got these crazy inclines on the one that's cement, and then the one that we did on the trails. Again, it was just like
rocks.
Rocks, and it's trail running, so you've got these inclines. It's interesting, is what Robert called it. I said treacherous once it got wet. But again, it was about challenging ourselves, and Robert absolutely crushed it. Like, he went at the same speed that he would for a 1 mile run. He did that every 4 mile run. Did not slow down, did not let up at all, left me in the dust many times. And so I just can't say enough great things about his mindset, and his resilience are tremendous, but you really don't know how tremendous it is until you do something like this. And I saw you do it firsthand. I saw you go internal. I saw you really push. And so to anybody who's questioning if he is a savage, if he is a keto savage, he absolutely is. And it shows me that you could do anything you wanted. Like, if you wanted to be an ultramarathoner, you absolutely could. You're just choosing to express yourself from a bodybuilding component for the most part. But again, the 50-mile run, 50-mile ruck march, like it shows what you're capable of. And to have that kind of mindset and then be able to apply it in business and leadership, you're unstoppable, brother.
Well, likewise, man. I mean, we were talking, you said you're turning 50 next month? Is that what
this
it is?
month.
This month.
I'll be 50 on the 27th.
Well, happy early birthday.
Thanks.
So you've got like almost 20 years on me, man, which is, not a trivial amount of years. And you're out there and you're killing it as well. I mean, you never once complained. You never once stopped. I mean, you're out there hustling, man. I mean, and there was a few times where your hip flexors were seizing up and you walked a little bit to stretch that out. But I can't honestly point to too many 50-year-olds that was out there, that would be out there and be capable of doing what you were doing.
And that's what it was. It was like, okay, even if I have to walk to stretch these things out, it doesn't mean I'm going to stop. And I walk long enough for them to open up, and then I run, and then if they start locking up, that's fine. But, if I have to crawl, like I said, if I have to crawl through the last 4 miles, I'll do it, because we haven't come this far to just stop right at the precipice. Yeah. And that's when we really dig deep, and that's when we realize what we're made of. It's not always going to be easy, but nothing in life is, and we have to make the decision. We're paying a price either way in anything that we do, whether it be the price of mediocrity or the price of greatness. And even in the attempt of great things, it helps us get to that next level. So I was telling you last year when I did this, it helped me elevate. In business, we look back at what we did before, and if we elevate to a higher level, like what you've done here, where you've got this incredible team, you built this incredible compound, you look back at what you did before. So if you're doing $250,000, and then if I'm your business coach and say, oh, we just worked twice as hard, and you're like, well, there's not enough hours in the day to work twice as hard. Mm-hmm. But when you have better systems in place, you have a better team, you can truly scale. Now you can look back at what you were doing before and say, why was I even doing that?
Yeah.
With this, it's the same way. It makes you look at those areas where you're like, oh, I compromised on that, or I barely checked the box on that, or I phoned this in. The 4x4x48 helps you see all the areas, all the pockets of opportunity that you're letting go by. And when that happens and you know what you're truly capable of, it really keeps you from staying satisfied with being less than what you could be.
Yeah, I think, perspective in life is everything. And, the hardest thing you've ever done is always the hardest thing you've ever done. So, what I view as incredibly challenging, other people may view as trivial, and vice versa, depending on what people have experienced in life. So pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and gaining more perspective as to what you're truly capable of, both physically and mentally and emotionally, makes your perspective that much more enhanced, and it gives you that much more, opportunity and understanding of where you're at in life, and you can kind of peel the curtain back on where you've been before, right. And it makes it trivial in your own mind at that moment, or something that's seemingly insurmountable. But with something like this, for instance, after about 14 miles or so, after whatever stint that was, I'm hurting at that point. Like, my knees are hurting, my ankles are hurting, like everything's hurting. I'm sleep deprived. Like, a lot of people stop when they start feeling pain. Right. And we were feeling pain before we ever even hit the halfway point. But it's like, failure is not an option. Like, I'm grabbing the crutches and hobbling across this finish line if I have to. So when you know that you cannot back out and you push through, it's incredibly empowering. Like, when we first started each lap after we started hurting, like, the first couple laps is brutal. Like, you and I are both out there looking like 90-year-olds. Yep.
The old man shuffle.
Yeah, the old man shuffle, going the pace of a snail. But then after you start warming up a little bit, the joints get a little lubricated, you can kind of pick up the pace, and it's a little bit easier. But that first little bit is brutal. And I feel like that is, synonymous with most things in life. When you're doing something new, when you're doing something outside your comfort zone, when you're hurting, and when you don't have the perspective, that first little bit's freaking hard. Like in business, there's so many hurdles in business, like taxes and LLCs, and if you got a food product business, getting like the health department, like there's all these things that are hurdles that are not designed to stop you, but definitely act as a way to really separate the people that want it from those that don't.
Exactly.
But when you're able to push through all that and then get to the other side, it's like you start building some momentum, and then once you have the momentum to carry you through, you just keep on trucking. And I feel like, I don't know what David Goggins' original intent was when he made this challenge, but I feel like there's so many, there's so many instances in which it can be applied to every person's day-to-day life, no matter what they're doing, no matter where they're at. It's very applicable to everything that everyone's doing.
It absolutely is. And just like you said, when there's no other choice, the choice is simple. We're committed. We're doing this. So by hook or by crook, if you're carrying me or I'm carrying you, we get there. And it's the same thing with business, with a relationship, with anything in our lives. If we give ourselves in the back of our head the idea that, well, if this doesn't work, I can always quit, then we will subconsciously hold ourselves back. David Goggins talks about the 40% rule, where it feels like you want to give up, and that's where your body actually, when you want to give up the most, you're only at 40% of what you're capable of. And my goal is with my clients to get them to that 80%, because there's the 20% of life that we can't control, whether it be a cancer diagnosis, a death in a family, financial ruin, et cetera. But knowing what you're capable of and being able to push pretty close to that max lets you have this adversity kind of bubble, mm-hmm. this kind of buffer to let you get through the other parts of it. And like you said, the 4x4x48, for those of you that don't run, I'm not a runner. I'm
not a runner either.
Yeah, I don't enjoy running at all.
I hate it.
I do too. In the military, that was the default. Nope, whatever's going on, okay, go for a run. And it's like, all right, we're just beating our joints up. But even if you were able to work out for 45 minutes, if you were able to walk for 45 minutes, if you do it on the time hacks, if you do it with the sleep deprivation, it will show you what you're truly capable of, and it will make you tap into things that you didn't know were even there. And the reason why we do that is because we've never pushed to that point.
Mm-hmm.
We've never been in a place where we had to go above and beyond. And if you're not going to do it for you, imagine how this will impact the people around you, your business, your family, your loved ones, your friends. So what happens is, we were talking about how the tide that rises all ships. What I have found, like even coaching my clients, when I elevate a level, they have no other option other than to use the gravity of that to get up higher.
Mm-hmm.
They know I'm going to call them on their bullshit. They know that I'm going to actually say, is that true, or did you just go until you hit adversity? Because that's what everybody does. Just like with lifting, right? You go to that point where it's like, now it's difficult. Okay, I've hit failure. No, you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Focus, all of a sudden, you got another rep. Oh, you got 2 more reps. You got 3 more reps now. And now your form is breaking down, so you better quit. But the idea is, if you can get 3 extra reps each time,
Mm-hmm.
each workout, 5 workouts in a week, 15 in a month, 15 in a week, 16 a month? That's a lot of progress that you can make. And that's that area that we have to go into and just lean into and understand that that's where we actually get the most growth.
Yeah. It is crazy how much, like, before you even reach that halfway point, your mind is telling you, look, we're done. Your body's telling you we're done.
Yep.
Like, with the 40% rule, like, what is that defined as exactly? Like, Goggins basically says, when you're feeling like quitting, you've only reached 40% of your true potential. Is that basically what he says?
Yeah, and that's basically from the military. If you've been in any military, they talk about that. But the 40% rule is like you said, when your mind wants to quit or when your body's hurting. But there's a lot more in there.
Mm-hmm.
And think of it like a defense mechanism. We're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to not get ourselves in a place where we're going to be in danger. And I understand that that's important from a biological standpoint for survival. But in the environment that we live in today, where we have first world problems like, my latte's not hot enough, or, the Wi-Fi here sucks. In the grand scheme of things, we need this kick in the ass to keep us really honest and ground us back to what's truly important, what's truly a threat, what's truly remarkable. And if we don't do this consistently, then we get caught up on social media, the semantics of BS and politics, people that are complaining about pronouns, things like that, things that are in the grand scheme of things that don't really matter.
Yeah.
And if we don't start looking towards those things, we will be woefully ill-prepared for life when adversity actually does come in. So even with what's going on in the world right now, there's a lot of stuff that helps people kind of quickly realize that there's a lot of fluff, that there's a lot of BS.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can live from that place of trying to be as grounded as we can to reality. And I always say that people always talk about, have your why. It's not about your why. It's about self-knowledge. Because if you have a why and you're saying, it's this group or my family that I'm using as my why, what will happen is, if you're not careful, you'll work your ass off for this why, these people or this company. And then there'll be a time when you go through some hardship and maybe you don't feel like you're being recognized or appreciated as much or loved as much as you should. And it can turn into this unnecessary resentment. But if you just look at it and say, I'm doing this to figure out what I can do. Self-knowledge comes from embracing adversity. And the more that you know about yourself and you can be really honest, we talk to clients, right? You have that client when you ask them, okay, what is the easiest way you're going to self-sabotage yourself on this goal? Whether it be keto, whether it be in business. And you just have that conversation now before they get into it. And now all of a sudden they start realizing, this is what I would do. And then you have the discussion early and you get in front of it and you take all the strength from it. And now if you're in that position again, you've already had the conversation, you've already decided, again, you're already committed. So now you don't have to wonder, again, when I'm tired, am I going to quit? When my body's hurt, am I going to quit? Well, those things are inevitable.
Yeah.
Whether you quit or not is on you. And that self-knowledge comes through knowledge of yourself through adversity.
Yeah, you really truly do give yourself all the options at the onset. Like, if quitting is an option, if it's not. And when you know it's not, like, you don't let your mind sabotage you. Like, when we were running, before we even got to halfway point, I'm like, this freaking sucks. I'm hurting. Why are we doing this? Yada, yada, yada. But I knew I was going to finish it come hell or high water, so it didn't really matter. So there's no benefit in, like, letting myself become victim to those thoughts. Right. And then once you I don't know where that point is, probably a little bit different for everybody, but once you crest that, point, which for me, the last, probably when I knew there was 3 stints left, like, it was easy after that. When there was 3 stints left, I guess that would be
10 a.m.,
2 p.m., and 6 p.m. Yep. It's like, it's all downhill from here. I mean, and the last stint, I was freaking sprinting. You know, like I did the most
Yes,
treacherous trail,
Yep.
and I was sprinting the whole way at the end, and I was like hooping and hollering.
Yep.
And I mean, from a physical standpoint, my body was the most worn down at that point, the most sleep deprived, the most beaten. But mentally, I was on cloud nine because it's like, look, it's already over. Like, just finish strong. And when you do that, you can kind of like reverse engineer that and apply that to the beginning, the middle, and throughout the end, so that you know that, hey, look, how you feel, how you perform is totally within your mind. And so many people don't do that, and they have this victim mentality. We were talking about that the other day too. When you have this extreme ownership, kind of to quote Jonko there, like you feel much more empowered. And some people, that they find that scary because like they have no one to point to. But when you have this extreme ownership mentality and it's always on you and you accept full responsibility, in my mind and in your mind, that's empowering, because whether you fail or you succeed, it's always your fault. And I feel like that's liberating in my opinion. It
absolutely is. For me, the minute that I stopped trying to wait for somebody to save me was when I had to save myself.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't need somebody to come save them. We don't need something outside of us. We need to take ownership of who we are and tap into that potential. And the way that we tap into that is by pushing ourselves and doing hard shit. And this is a perfect opportunity to do it. So many times in the victim mentality, and listen, I understand if you're in a place of mourning, that's fine. There's a time for that. But eventually you know in your mind that you're just sitting here feeding that you're just sitting here wallowing in that. And now you're not doing enough to push you forward. And if you aren't able to be aware of that, if you don't have that self-knowledge, then again, that becomes your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Being a victim is an identity. And now you put that out there signaling on social media. So all of a sudden, if you do happen to have a good day and then somebody like comments, oh, Mr. Pessimistic, Mr. Sarcastic, Mr. I hate Mondays and I live for Fridays. Now that paints you into a corner
mm-hmm.
intellectually. So even if you wanted to break out of that, even if you were feeling more empowered, you wouldn't do it, because you would allow the opinions of others that you've pretty much created on your own keep you there. And all of a sudden, people get stuck in that. I call it the adversity skill, right? Like the worst thing you've ever done in your life is a 10, the hardest thing you've ever done. And then like heaven on earth is 0. As you were saying, if you can click that scale up little by little, it makes you really aware of what you're hitting. But also, if you said to yourself, okay, the 4x4x48 was the most difficult thing I've done in my life, and then we're having a conversation or you're dealing with a retailer or whatever, it's going to, it's a pain in the ass. But if you look at it, you're like, on the grand scheme of things, honestly, what is this?
Yeah.
Compared to the 4x4x48, this is like a 2 or a 3. Like this conversation will be done in 45 minutes or whatever it is. And now you can move on to the next thing. And with that knowledge, again, it's emboldening. It helps you embolden you. It helps you move forward aggressively, because you know the end result is still going to be what you want.
Right.
And with that knowledge, like how many people would be even more resolute, be even more committed, be even more aggressive towards the things they want if they knew that if they could just push this one point, it would all be downhill.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that's how life is.
Yeah.
So if you belabor the point, if you drag your feet, you're actually making it harder on yourself. If you have your foot on the brake and trying to push the gas, you're literally holding yourself back. You're shooting yourself in the foot. So if that's the understanding that you have from doing hard things, then you just have to be able to step away and say, I want to have hindsight now. I want to realize that in a few hours I can get a warm shower, I can get some food, I can go have some Mexican food to celebrate, and I can lay down for more than an hour at a time. And with that knowledge, it's these, I call them micro adversities, but other people in the military call them micro goals. So for us, it was like, how many laps do we have to do? And they're like, okay, I've got 5 more laps. I've got 4 more laps. I've got 3 more laps, 2 more laps. And so it's just about not thinking how hard it's going to be in the long run. It's about finishing this breath, this rep, this step,
mm-hmm.
and then just keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm doing a competition prep, that's exactly what I do. Like, I break it down. Like, if I was to think about it in terms of, hey, look, I've got 6 more months of this, like, that's debilitating.
Oh, yeah.
But if I look at it, hey, look, 1 more rep, 1 more meal, 1 more whatever, and you break it down in that micro stance, I mean, it's very, very doable. And at that point, the factor, like the single most definitive factor that determines those that succeed and those that don't, is just consistency. And that, if I was to pick one superhero trait of mine, it's that I'm a freaking stubborn son of a bitch. Like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to freaking do something, no matter what. And that's why I like competition preps, because they are very long. They're 4 to 6 months long. And at no point in an entire prep is it like incredibly daunting and challenging. Like it's a workout, it's a meal, it's whatever. But it's like the hard part is doing it over the course of that 4 to 6 month span. And most people falter because they get bored with it. They want to return to some degree of normalcy, and they don't have that staying power. But I feel like consistency and discipline towards the long game, towards that staying power, just chipping away at it every single day, that is what makes people succeed. That's true in business, that's true in relationships, that's true in fitness, that's true in everything in life.
Yep. And it's the analogy that I use is, if we're doing a bench press and I have my arms locked out, I can hold the weight there for a long time because I'm using the rest of my structure of my body to take a lot of that bearing. So that's what consistency, that's what discipline does. It takes all the emotion out of it. It takes all the effort out of it. But if I'm having to continually muscle my way through with artificial motivation and trying to tell myself all these other lies that I'm corroborating in my own mind, or making these, I'll make a deal with myself. If I do this, and then I can do this. What you're doing is you're actually making it harder on yourself unnecessarily. But again, taking the emotion out of it. Emotions assassinate the truth. Being consistent with what's going on. And the people that I find that are the most triggered by the word motivation or triggered by the word discipline are people that lack discipline and lack motivation. So don't even try to be motivated. Try to be disciplined. Try to be consistent. And those routines eventually create gravity, and they eventually move you through. So you're already moving in this direction, like pedaling a bike. Ed Milet tells a story about when he was teaching his daughter, Bella, how to ride a bike. And he would push her, and she would start riding, and she would start pedaling. But then when she saw that she was moving, she would stop pedaling and just, try to enjoy the experience. But every time she would stop pedaling, she would fall down. And every time he would push her, he would say, keep pedaling, keep moving forward, keep feeding into it. So in business and anything in life, even when things are going well, we need to keep pedaling. We need to keep pushing, because that creates that momentum. So when we do get stuck in the mud for a minute, the momentum from the discipline, from the routine, from the consistency pushes us through, and now we can attack it again more aggressively, even if we get stuck for just a moment.
I think having non-negotiables in your life is it takes the guesswork out of it. It removes that from weighing on your mental bandwidth. Like for me, working out is a good thing. Working out is always a good thing. Eating healthy is always a good thing. There's no downside that comes from eating healthy. Doing these things and having them as non-negotiables is key to my success. I look at Crystal. She's, 32 weeks pregnant as of Wednesday. And most people, I would say, they use something like that that's not a normal thing, like being pregnant, as this, get out of jail free card, so to speak, of like, okay, it's okay for me to cheat on my diet. It's okay for me to slack up on my training. It's okay for me to stop doing all these things that have led to my success thus far in life, because I've got this, extraneous circumstance that's only temporary. But I've been super proud of her because she's maintained her diet the whole way through. She's maintained her training the whole way through. Her pregnancy's been a breeze, honestly. And I think it's because she's leaned into those things that have brought her all the success that she's experienced thus far. And the same is true with you. The same is true with me. Like, people experience success oftentimes, and then they use that moment, that high that they're on, as a reason to stop doing the things that brought them to that successful spot to begin with. And for me, it's like, I probably don't celebrate the wins as much as I should, because I'm always moving on to the next thing and staying, aggressive. But that's what brings me the excitement. That's what brings me the satisfaction. It's not so much the act of winning or succeeding, so much it is the journey to get there. And when you forego that to the point that you're foregoing what brought you there to begin with, you are literally failing. You will not play the long game. You will not last, because you're sacrificing the character traits that brought that success to begin with.
And to brag on your wife a little bit, she was out with us yesterday in the rain at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. And she wasn't running, guys. I'm not saying that, but she was walking the whole time.
Yeah.
So she was there as an act of solidarity, and she didn't need to be out there.
No.
She probably got 4 or 6 miles on her own just walking around, and that was great for her and the baby. And just like you said, the journey is guaranteed. There's going to be a journey. The destination is not. But if you can feed into that journey to the best of your capacity and ask yourself, what is the courageous decision right now? If you elevate that, if you use that as your litmus test, the courageous decision would be to eat properly here. The courageous decision would be to work out even if I don't feel like it. The courageous decision is to admit to my wife or to my loved ones, hey, I messed up and I apologize. I was in a bad place, whatever it is. Or being honest with yourself and saying, yeah, you slacked on that. That courageous decision is what allows you to make the right decision, even when you don't feel like doing it. Like all things, it's about what's the courageous decision? What is the quality over quantity idea here? What would be the most quality use of my time right now? Mm-hmm. Am I 80-20 in this? Am I using Parkinson's law? Am I using Hicks law? Am I trying to use Occam's razor? Am I trying to simplify things? Am I trying to align things so that now when I move forward, I can just do all these things in order, as opposed to running way over here, dealing with this thing, now having to turn 180, run over here, wasting more time in transit than actually doing things with it. So that idea and that commitment to the journey makes the destination a foregone conclusion. But if you don't come at it with that idea, if you don't come at it with this understanding that it is going to take time, but anything worth doing, anything in your life that is worth doing takes time, it takes effort. And if you think about in your life, any time when you felt really proud, it's because you went through something difficult. It's because you were pushed. If you have that coach or that leader that demands more of you and says, I'm being hard on you because I know that you're capable of more.
Yeah.
You may not like him at the time. You don't have to. But at the end of the day, when you get to that place and you're like, wow, I'm so glad we got there. It's amazing. Once you're at the top of the mountain, all the hardship that you went through to get there, all the adversity you went through becomes irrelevant. You don't even care about it. We're sore today, but I'm so glad that we did it.
Yeah.
And we're going to be sore anyway, right?
Yeah, totally. And I feel like, there's so many points in life, there's so many points in the acute and in the macro, the chronic, where it's like you have the choice to push yourself and excel and do that hard, challenging thing or not. But the moment you decide not to, it becomes exponentially easier to not to, just to say no to it again and again and again. Like for me personally, my goal throughout this was to not walk at any one point. Like my goal was to be able to say, hey, look, I ran 50 miles, full stop, never once walked. And nothing against people that do walk. You walk some because you had some hip flexor issues. But for me, I knew that if I had walked, it'd have been easier to justify walking later, And so many people have that in so many ways. Like it would have been easier for us to say, let's sleep a little bit longer and start a little bit later.
Yep.
If we had allowed ourselves to do that once, but we didn't. So like the moments people allow themselves to give into a weakness or a temptation or say no to the hard conversation that needs to be had, it becomes so much easier to continue to do that. And I mean, everything compounds. The good compounds, the bad compounds. So if you start veering off a path that is negative or easy or oversimplified or not the right path, your compounding effect of that is going to be that much harder to break free of as time goes on.
And that's the key. The way that we conduct ourselves in the face of adversity is an indication of how we do everything else in our life. Mm-hmm. And like you said, if I compromise once, if I cheat on my diet, that makes it easier for me to cheat on my wife. Mm-hmm. So if we decide to compromise at the first sign of adversity, that bleeds over into everything else that we do in our life. And it's like, well, yeah, no problem. And then, like you said, that becomes this cascade where now all of a sudden, you're sitting in front of the TV all day, you're eating crap food, you feel horrible, and you have the audacity to wonder why, because you haven't moved your body, you haven't fed it properly. And probably the stuff that you're putting into your mind at that moment, there's times to have decompression, kind of a reboot, that's fine. But in the end, people always thought that it was lack of information that kept people, stupid. We see now that having more information is not the answer. If more information was the answer, then everybody would be a billionaire and have six-pack abs right now because of the internet. And I think you see that that's not the case. If anything, we've actually devolved in a lot of ways. We've actually regressed because now people are looking for somebody else to give them this artificial pacification, this artificial motivation for a few moments. Like we were talking about, like the tweets that I do, I try to make them very simple. And for whatever reason, people like that bite-sized nugget of, it makes them feel inspired. but I'm afraid that they don't see the underlying stuff. I'm afraid they don't see what got me to that point to say that so succinctly. And if you don't understand that, then you're basically just, getting this artificial soundbite that makes you feel good for a few moments and then moving on to the next thing. If we can just understand that there are going to be times when we don't feel great, even if we're doing everything proper in our life, people talk about it's the 5 steps of ownership, or the 5 steps of acceptance. And it goes denial. So something bad happens, adversity enters your life. You go into denial, then you go into this place of anger. Mm-hmm. And the anger is based on resentment because of what you saw that you could have done. You have remorse. Then the third phase is you're there, and all of a sudden now you're trying to bargain in some capacity. And a lot of times people go into a microcycle of just that. Denial, anger, bargaining, back into anger again because you don't want to accept it, back into bargaining, back into denial. And if you look at that, all those are basically the victim cycle. Once we're through the place of actually stopping this understanding and knowing that I can't make a bargain with anybody to do this, then you go into depression, and then you go into acceptance. So there's going to be times, even with successful people, I've had clients that are incredibly successful, and they're like, man, I just feel really depressed. And it's because all these cycles are going on extraneously, whether they're aware of it or not. So for one of them, incredibly successful, amazing business, making all this money, and then they had a child. And that for him was the conclusion that he didn't have any opportunity to bail out. He couldn't just quit the business or get divorced and go backpack through Europe. Mm-hmm. And even though he says, I felt really guilty for feeling like that, I have all these things going on that everybody would love to have. On the outside, I look very successful. But that's what you see with successful people, is they're going through this place of acceptance. So if we can just sit with that and understand this is just an emotion, this will pass. In Zen, they say that when you meditate, when a thought enters your mind, if you stop and give it tea, it will stay there and it will proliferate. But if you just let it come and go, so again, just being okay with the emotion, saying, I don't feel great right now, that's okay. I don't have to try to get on TikTok to give myself a dopamine hit. I don't have to eat some shit food to give me an insulin spike. And if you're not sure if that's really hitting you right now, ask yourself right now, if you're feeling this emotion, ask yourself, where is the evidence that this is harming me? Mm-hmm. Unless you have like a suicidal ideology or you have like harming tendencies, it won't. And then you can just understand it for what it is and accept it for what it is, without emotion, without expectation, without desire. And then eventually it will flow through you and it will go away. And again, that's another excellent example of what we found for the 4x4x48. If I'm resisting this the whole time, God, this sucks. God, I'm cold. Man, it's raining again. It doesn't matter. Me resisting against it makes it difficult. So having this radical, almost aggressive acceptance of everything. I say yes now. What does that do? In those 5 steps that we just talked about, I go from skipping denial, skipping anger, skipping everything, and I go right to, this is the reality. I accept it for what it is. And the sooner that we can get to that reality, the sooner we can actually take action to change it. But if I'm fighting against it the whole time, if I have a flat tire and I'm like, I can't believe this is happening, and now I'm pissed off and I'm yelling and screaming, again, what am I doing? I'm in denial. Eventually I have to get to the point to realize, do I make a phone call? Do I start changing my own tire? What do I do? But all that time in between there, we're wasting.
Yeah.
And if you look at your life, there's a lot of mental bandwidth that we waste, a lot of emotional bandwidth that we waste in the process of trying to deny the reality that is right before us.
Yeah, I think, like not everybody listening to this is a business owner, but I think in owning a business that has employees, that has a physical product, that has shipping and logistics and customer service and all that stuff, I've learned to think ahead on a level that it's comical how crazy far I have to think ahead, and I have to imagine all the worst case scenarios and then plan accordingly and have a contingency plan in place for everything that possibly can happen. And the amount of times that it actually happens that those contingency plans have to be put into effect because something does, like the random things that you would never expect to happen to me all the time. And it's not like I've got bad luck. because I don't believe in bad luck. Like, you make your own luck. If something happens that's outside the plan, it's my fault. Even if it's not my doing, it's always my fault. Yeah. And when you do that, your ability to plan accordingly, plan ahead, and then be at peace with the outcome is so much better than if I was to just, have this, oh, woe was me victim mentality. And then because I've planned ahead, my ability to not go into denial and go through those 5 phases, because I've already planned for that, adverse thing happening, is just much better. I've got a hedge against all the negative bets. And, sometimes I don't plan for something, like some things happen out of my knowledge, but that's an opportunity for growth right there. It's an opportunity to know, okay, next time I need to plan for this because this is now a possibility. And that can be applied to everybody, whether they own a business or not, because everybody goes through things that aren't unexpected, that are unplanned. But it amazes me how many people have these unexpected, extraneous circumstances come into their life, and they just let that ruin their life. Like, they have a bad day, and then it just has this negative cascade of effects that just continues to compound and create a worse day. But I mean, like, the day is going to happen. The 24 hours are going to revolve whether you want it to or not. And life is finite. The fact that you're breathing and listening to this podcast right now puts you in the top 1%. So to think negatively towards anything that's happening in your, frail little life is just totally inconducive to any amount of positivity or success that you could ever see or experience. So taking everything as it comes, running with it, making the most of it, not having a victim mentality, not going into denial, not going into this negative cascading thought process is so key. And I feel like owning a business is the vehicle that allowed me to figure out who the hell I am as a person and how I need to function as a contributing member to society. And that vehicle can be very different for lots of different people based off of their life and what they're doing. But everybody owes it to themselves to figure out what the hell that vehicle is and needs to be, and then go full bore into it with everything they've got.
That's it. And the beauty of adversity is in my TEDx, in my book, I say it, it's like adversity shows up unannounced at the most inopportune time without apology. It couldn't care less about what you want. It doesn't give a damn about your feelings. And adversity doesn't take no for an answer. It forces us to elevate to a higher level. It never lets us do just enough to get by. It knows our true potential even when we don't, which is why it kicks our ass when we don't give 100%. And Rich DeVinny wrote an incredible book called The Attributes. He's the next Navy SEAL commander. And he was saying that resilience is not just the ability to have grit, it's the capacity to adapt to the unexpected. So there's a lot of people that are mentally strong or there's like different circles in our life, right? So you have a person who's incredibly disciplined with their working out and their diet. But then when they go to their job, they're half-assing it. When they're in their relationship, they're kind of empty. So if you have this ability, if you have this framework in one area, why aren't you challenging yourself to do it in other places? Why aren't you challenging that same discipline that you use in the gym to work towards your own personal life, whether it be creating a side hustle, being a better leader at work, being a better husband or wife, being a better member of your society? David Goggins even said it in his book. He was saying how he knew that he wasn't very smart. And he said that he took the same discipline that he did from running to learning like dive manuals. Mm-hmm. So he knew that he would have to write it out manually 10 times to get to the place to do it. That's incredible discipline. And again, it's easy to be disciplined in one sphere, but do you have the honesty with yourself to say, man, if I could keep doing what I'm doing over here and write this down 10 times or whatever it takes to get into that place, that's what it takes to get you to that next area. So again, like you said, the vehicle of the business, it's the best personal development project you could ever have because you learn more about yourself writing a book, creating a business, dealing with those hardships than you ever would from trying. I hate that everybody is looking for the next program or the next book or the next mastermind to give them all the answers, to give them all this formula to success. But again, like I said before, I can give you all the formulas in the world, but if you don't know who the hell you are or what you believe in or what's important to you, like really important, none of this shit matters. It doesn't. You're just following somebody else's formula that may or may not have helped them in that moment. And until you can find something that is truly in alignment with you and congruent with everything that you're doing and you believe in, you're going to be basically inefficient with a lot of your time.
Totally agree. Let me ask you this. We live in an era in a time, in a place in which things are pretty cush. I mean, there's definitely things going on in the world right now that are not sunshine and rainbows, and I don't want to discredit that. But I mean, if you have time to listen to a podcast, if you have, if you have money in the bank, if you have clothes on your back, if you have food in the fridge, then you're probably not waking up every single day questioning whether or not you're going to be surviving that day. So we create these self-imposed hardships, whether that be something like the 4x4x48, whether that be a bodybuilding competition prep, whether that be a business, whether that be a marathon, whatever that is. We create these self-imposed hardships to benefit from all the mental, psychological, emotional, physical strains that result. And for people like you and I mean, I think like a self-masochist, like I seek out the pain. Like I feel distraught when things are comfortable. Like I feel like if I'm in a place of comfort, I'm doing something wrong. Like that's what brings me anxiety. If I'm incredibly miserable, I feel more at peace, which is just weird to say, but it's the truth. And some people, they don't have near enough hardship. And some people on the other end of the spectrum, they create so much hardship that they are not able to relax. And that can be a negative thing as well. So how would you define enough? What is enough? Is enough a good thing? I don't think satisfaction is a good thing. I think contentment is a good thing. I like to be content with where I am at, always striving to be better, but I like to be content with where I'm at, but not so much satisfied with where I'm at. So learning how to, present things and bring things into my life that push me, but in a sustainable manner that, like, you and I just got done running 50 miles, and that was great. But it probably would be counterintuitive or counterproductive for us to run 50 miles every single day of our life, So at what point, and this is going to be different for everybody, but how would you define enough, and how would you define sustainability and scalability? Like, how would you structure this in a way that is more positive than negative?
And that's a great point, because if you look at social media, you're going to have one side of the side that tells you always push, hashtag team no sleep, grind, grind, grind. If you're having to grind 18 hours a day, you're doing something wrong. You're not efficient with your time. So in my mind, doing enough means that I'm doing everything that I possibly can efficiently, being very honest with myself. Again, that self-knowledge, adversity is the gateway to self-knowledge. That helps you understand what is enough. But the beautiful point that you brought up also is us running again today would be stupid and counterproductive, unnecessary, right? So sometimes enough means you're asking yourself to demand more. Sometimes, especially for people that are hard chargers, the hardest thing for them to do is take a step back. The hardest thing for them to do is to not keep pushing, to not continue to make that phone call, to not continue making that email. And the thing is, like you said, for each of us, that as an individual, that's different. And you also go through phases, right? You go through phases writing your book, phases in prep for competition. There's going to be places like we were talking about it. My wife and I last year, we traveled once every month, and then we got married. And you and Krista were there, and I'm so glad you were. Mm-hmm. By January of this year, if I'd have followed that same pace, I talked to her, and she's like, because that's what I said. It's like, it's January, let's go to the Caribbean or something. And she's like, that sounds good. And I'm like, what's going on? And she said, frankly, with all the stuff we did last year, it would feel good just to have like a staycation.
Yeah.
So again, to be honest with yourself and say, what's enough? Maybe once enough, what is enough is in this moment, what's optimal. Back to Rich Devaney, he says, it's not about peak performance, it's about optimal performance. So we were not at 100% at 2 a.m. Sunday morning, but we gave everything that we had. We gave whatever we had in the tank. Whatever your 100% is, we gave it at that moment. And that's where enough is. That's where making it in a way where it's optimal, where you're not getting these huge diminishing returns, where you're not unnecessarily injuring yourself, where you're not putting yourself into like a psychological or mental state where now, no matter what happens, you're not happy, or putting yourself in a place where you can't even connect and be transparent with a loved one, people on your team, et cetera. Because without that, I was talking to you about people that I've coached where they weren't being honest with themselves, and that made it impossible for them to be honest with other people. And now you're sending out these mixed signals, and now people are confused. And you may have an expectation from somebody else or from a team member, and you may never have even expressed that. But if you don't, it's impossible for them to read your mind, to anticipate everything that you want. Why don't you just tell them? Mm-hmm. This is what I'm expecting. This is what enough is. This is what good is. If we want excellence, we try to go above that as much as we can in a way that, again, is sustainable. Because if we don't, it's very easy for us as hard chargers to burn out. Even me, after my injury, for those of you that don't know, I was injured in the military. I was paralyzed from the neck down, died on the table twice. I was told I'd never walk again. So at 40 years old, that's what happened. Now, once I got out, trying to figure out what the hell do I do with my life, that was another challenge. And then once I started on this entrepreneurial path, writing a book, speaking, I found myself very much drawn to this idea of just keep pushing, because life is finite and we only have so much time. But I also understood that there's more to life than just that push. There's more to life than just this artificial metric. You know, how much is enough? Again, how much mediocrity is enough for people? How much inconsistency is enough for people? If you can ask yourself those questions and be really honest about what really matters to you, like what would you fight or die for? That's a good place to begin. If you were injured like I was and you were able to walk again, what would you want to do immediately? Like, these are the real questions, not some artificial, little checklist that you get from social media or from a book. Most of those things are very superficial at best, and people love superficial because they don't actually have to do the work.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, man. I oftentimes think about death. Like, I think, memento mori.
Yep.
I think and I visualize, and I spend legitimate time thinking about what would my day look like if I died today? What would my day look like if Crystal was given a death sentence? Like, what are the most important people in my life, and how would I conduct myself if I knew that something treacherous was going to happen to them? And that sounds really morbid, but I feel like it improves the quality of the relationships I have with those people. It improves the quality of how I spend my time throughout that day and the plans that I make throughout my life. And I feel like, death is going to happen to us all. Like, it's inevitable. Like, you and I, we're going to be fertilizing daffodils before too long, So being at peace with that, accepting that, fixating on it for a moment, and then recognizing that it's going to happen, and then living your life with that knowledge, as opposed to sticking your head in the sand and running away from it. I mean, I think that's something that we all would benefit from. I feel like recognizing and being at peace with the fact that life is finite and that we are going to die, and that really focusing on how we're going to live that life, that's the key thing. And people say this like it's all said, it's all out there. It's probably in some much fancier quote than I've just illustrated somewhere. But I feel like so few people live with that knowledge. Like, if I was dying today, I would honestly be smiling, man. Like, I have no regrets. Like, sure, there's things that I wish I would have done, could have done, should have done. But at the end of the day, like, I'm proud of the life that I've lived up to this point. Like, I feel good about it. And I'm happy to say that. I don't know if most people could say that. I hope so, but I don't know that that's the case. But yeah, man, I think recognizing and being at peace with the brevity of life is a super, super important character trait. And like you were saying, we have to figure out a way to push, but then also be sustainable. I feel like if 100% is ending with your death, like if you're running a marathon, you're like, hey, I'm going to give it 100%. And people say, I'm going to give it 100%, go all the time. Give it 110%. But if you give it 100%, like, that would literally mean that you die at the end of it. You give it all that you have to the point that your heart literally stops beating when you cross that finish line. That's 100%. Obviously, we don't want to do that every time we run a marathon. And marathon meaning anything in life that's hard. Because you obviously would be cutting your life pretty short. Yeah. To me, it's far more impressive to live at 80%, 100% of the time, than to go 99% once or twice throughout your entire existence. What I've tried to do is live pretty much 80%. Like, I find that making 80%, that's more or less sustainable in my eyes. Be 80%. And then do things like this, like the 4x4x48. I mean, that wasn't 100% for us because we didn't die. We're still here breathing. Yeah. But that was I don't know, 90% maybe. So if you're living life 80%, but then you've got, moments in time, a couple times throughout the year where you go to 90, 95% and you really figure out what you're made of, that makes what at that point is 80% being sustainable. It just ups the ante a little bit so that, next time your current 80% is actually 85% going forward. And I feel like if you do that repetitively over the course of your existence, what you find to be sustainable and scalable just continues to improve. And I feel like that should be all of our goal. If everybody knows if they're pushing it or if they're not. Yeah. Like whenever I go too long without really pushing it, I feel guilty. Like I feel bad. That's why I do something like this challenge. That's why I do something like writing the book. That's why I do something that's outside of my normal area of comfort. But we all know if we're pushing ourselves or not. And what my level of perspective as to what is hard is going to be different for anybody else. But we all inherently know if we're doing it right or doing it wrong. And you got to have enough self-awareness and be honest with yourself and then adjust and act accordingly.
That's it. Josh Waitzkin, he wrote the Art of Learning, and he's a peak performance coach for like the most impressive, hedge fund managers in the world. He's got 4 different interviews on Tim Ferriss's show. Amazing guy, right? He says that in the progression to excellence, it is a marathon and it is a sprint. It is a marathon of sprints. And that's what you're talking about. It's like, I know the 80% is right to the point where it forces me to adapt, but not to the point where I'm breaking my legs every time I do squats. And even then, I found coaching different people, you have a person who's like an incredible achiever in business, and then they get corroborated by that behavior because of society, and they go, oh, look at this entrepreneur changing the world, doing all these things. And they think that unless they're going at 1,000% in that area all the time, that they're not doing enough. They also fear, because they're doing well in one area, but their physical fitness, maybe it's not great. Their personal relationships probably not there. Meditation components or spirituality, belief systems, self-introspection, non-existent. And they fear that if they pull back even a little bit on this one area of business and pushing, that it's going to stop them, that that's going to be their edge. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember that the edge cuts both ways. And what I have found that is by giving them the capacity to pull back just a little bit in this one area and give more attention to their family, to their relationships, their physicality, their diet, fasting, keto stuff, and their ability to actually have some self-introspection. When these areas elevate, it takes where they used to be, even if it's pulled back, it makes everything elevate again and again and again. And now there's this joy, there's this satisfaction that they were afraid to allow themselves to feel in the process. And I know that may sound deep, but if you're doing anything, whether it be, and you're a leader, anybody that's listening to this is a leader in some way, whether you're a parent, whether you're a person that somebody looks up to at work, whether you own a multi-billion-dollar company, if you understand that, and you understand that you have to evolve and change, and that means, again, some of your characteristics have to evolve and change, your capacity to recognize things in yourself. Here's the thing. People think that empathy is this like soft, fluffy word, but empathy is so key, because if I have a team member and I don't have the intelligence to understand, to be empathetic to them and see that they're either going through something, or that what I'm asking them is too much, or that they're confused, or that I'm not clear enough on what I want from them, that's called pragmatic empathy. If I can't sense that, then I'm letting them down. I talked about it before, how if I'm a leader of a company and I'm talking about let's go kill it, let's go drag it back from the cave, and let's do all this stuff, and you have half the company's like, yeah, and the other half of the company is like, this sounds like it's going to be a lot more work, and it's going to be a lot more headache for us, and it feels like we're not going to get enough recognition for this. Now, unintentionally, you divided your company, mm-hmm. and now you're sending mixed signals. And now by not having that empathy, by being aware to just be able to read the room, it actually holds you back. It puts one arm behind your back. But if you can reach people and say, listen, you guys are amazing. You're the reason why we're able to do this stuff. You people in operations, you people in fulfillment, you guys are going above and beyond, and we can't thank you enough. As a matter of fact, our sales team has to step it up because they can't keep up with you. And now the sales team gets a kick in the ass, which is people that are in that arena usually like a little bit of fire. And then the people that are on the other side feel valued. They feel heard. They feel seen. And if they can have that, Now you've helped everybody. And now that you've given that message on both sides, and now you say together as a team, as a company, this is how we get to the next level. What we're doing matters. What we're doing is changing lives. You making keto bricks literally is changing people's lives. Tom Bill, you talked about it. His whole idea was this notion with Quest was to have a food bar or any kind of food that was actually decent for you, good for you, but also metabolically advantageous while tasting good. Mm-hmm. The same thing with keto bricks. Like, I recommend them to everybody. I mean, especially with what we were doing, right? Like, what do you say? I'm like, listen, I'm tired. I'm going to get 2 bites of this keto brick and I'm going to lay down. I get a couple 100 calories of just high quality nutrients that's going to feed me, that's going to help me recover the best of my capacity, going to give me the good fats to lubricate my joints, to keep my cognition where it needs to be. And I can give those to people that are hunters, people that are hikers, people that are any kind of outdoors person, because even in The Comfort Crisis by Easter, mm-hmm. he talks about when they would go hunting in like Alaska, they were eating just like crappy, granola bars that were 200 calories a piece. And it's like you'd have to eat 4 or 5 of those things to even feel any form of satisfaction. But eating 1 keto brick of yours is 1,000 quality calories. I mean, come on, man. You can put 2 or 3 of those in your rucksack and you're good. And hopefully you get a bison or something to actually be able to eat. But if you don't, you have enough to keep you going. And that's why what you do matters. That's why the way that you lead everybody. And when you have that sort of gravity and knowledge in every decision that you make, it forces you to make better decisions. So again, you're putting yourself in that place of having to do the right thing. You don't have the option of slacking. You don't have the option of falling back. Because if you're a leader and you're not leading by example, you're just setting a bad example.
Yeah.
Everybody's watching you. And the one time that they see you slack as a leader, if you have people over here that are working their ass off and then they think that you're not giving enough, they're always going to remember that snapshot in their mind. And now they're like, well, Robert's in there, with his feet kicked up, not doing anything. They're only going to give about 75% of what your 100% is. And we can't expect everybody to lead or have the same vision that we do. But when you hire quality people, they love what this message is about. They love what your vision is. And that's what will keep you going, again, when you hit the stick, get stuck in the mud sometimes.
Yeah, I think, the saying, how you do anything is how you do everything, comes to mind as you're saying that, because I feel like, no job is beneath me, and that transcends the business, but everything. I mean, like, I want to take pride in every single thing I do, whether it's sweeping the freaking break room floor or having a big sales call with a potential client. It all matters, and how you do anything is how you do everything. And I see so many people half-ass an area of their life that they don't feel is very important, and then they promise that they're going to be freaking stellar in other areas. But to me, if I see you half-ass anything, I'm assume that your ability to half-ass everything is amplified as well. So I really look for that attribute in people, like taking pride in everything you do, no matter how seemingly insignificant the task is. Another thing I don't want to forget, because you were bringing it up about, if you, like your salesperson example, like if they remove a little bit in that one area to add to other areas, and then the rises all ships. I think that is one key attribute of a marriage, believe it or not. So like Crystal is very different than me. Like we were raised very differently. Everything is very different. You're recently married as well to Rachel, and y'all are very different. But I think when you're married to somebody who is different than you, which everybody's different from one another in some form or fashion, it really sheds light onto all these different pillars of your life, and it forces you to open your eyes as to where things may be lacking. I mean, before I had her in my life, my ability to just go full bore towards business was there, but everything else suffered. In having her and giving her equal importance to anything that I'm doing, like it's not like I can look at life and be like, okay, yeah, this is the things that I want to do, and then on the back burner is all these things that Crystal wants to do. I have to literally look at it through the lens of, look, anything that she wants is just as important as anything I want. And when I have this equality towards all of her desires, it's like it's not fair for me to half-ass her wishes in order to fulfill my own. They have to all be in sync. So viewing life with this symbiotic lens now, in which case everything that I do and spend time on benefits the whole. Everything that I do and spend time on benefits her whole. And now we've got a baby on the way, that being forefront of my mind. Like that to me is what is the benefit of having a marriage, having a family, having something that brings other people into your life to the point where like you have to be aware of how you cannot just focus singularly on one thing because everything else will crumble. And so many people go through life only focused on one thing, and they're accepting of other things crumbling. But to me, like if you are 100% in one pillar and everything else is at 10%, then you are not winning. You are not succeeding. I mean, that is failing. I mean, there's so many more attributes of life than just one singular notion. So get a little abstract here, but having her in my life, basically to summarize all this, has been one of the most beneficial things for me for the business, which if you were to ask me that, 10 years ago before I ever met her, I'd probably be like, no, I just need to do this solo. I need to do this by myself. I mean, if I'm by myself, I could focus on everything that I want to focus on wholeheartedly. But having people inside your life that are not you, that think different than you, has been nothing but advantageous for me.
It's everything. And we were talking about, again, people that push really hard in business. Lots of times they do that because they don't want to deal with the anxiety of other parts of their life. They don't want to have to look at that. But as you say, when you have a fulfillment from a relationship, when you understand that every decision that you make affects her and your child, it gives you a lot. The stakes are much higher, and it makes you truly 80-20. Like the 80-20 principle, Pareto's principle is 20% of your actions create 80% of your outcomes. Now, everybody's heard that. If you've read Tim Ferriss's book, we've all heard that. But nobody is actually putting that into play. Like all these concepts, all these things we're talking about, if they would just be surgical with that and look at every area of their life and say, okay, what's my priority? What's really important? Again, her, your business, the child that's on the way, and then say, no bullshit. What's the most important thing to do here? When I'm tired, when you're in any state, you have to ask yourself, what do I do well in this state? So if you're tired, what I do well is I'm able to quickly hack away stuff that's not important. If I look at my schedule and I'm like, listen, I have a client call and I have this, and then there are these other things that are sort of superfluous, I immediately cut those things out because of my fatigue level, and I have to be completely present to that person, to that client, to give them everything. Mm-hmm. I owe it to them to do the best that I can. I owe it to them to make them a better person every time we're off that call. But if I'm trying to do a bunch of other things in addition to that, again, it's that drain. So it's so important to really have that notion of, just because I do something really well here doesn't mean that I can't apply that to other areas. And frankly, if you're not, like I can tell entrepreneurially where somebody is in their development by how much they talk about these things outside of business. Because if all they're talking about is grinding and how I crushed this and I just made a $20,000 deal here or $1 million deal, whatever it is, that's a person that shows me that they are not secure enough in their financial components to be able to talk about their wife, their kids, what they just did, what they want to do, what their hobbies are. It's almost like in martial arts when I spoke at Tony Blauer's event last summer in Orlando to all of his instructors. And you would see some younger guys sort of in the corner, and they've got like their blades out and they're comparing blades. And this is why I use this one to do different things. And I'm over there talking to Tony, and we're just talking about life. And he kind of looks over, and I look over at him too, at the people that were there. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just shows that there are different places of development. Those were guys that were just kind of new to this arena, to this idea of carrying a weapon, being responsible for a weapon, what it would take. When you're to a place where you've done that and you've kind of mastered that idea, you don't have to continually talk about it. You don't have to pontificate about it. You can just do other things because you feel secure in this, whether it be in your business space, whether it be in your personal relationship space, even your spiritual space. That's how we can get to the next place. But if we feel like we're inadequate in those areas, we're always going to try to beat our chest around that.
Yeah, we were talking about that kind of indirectly earlier today about the clothes we wear. Like I used to like really take a lot of pride in the clothes in my wardrobe, and now I wear freaking shorts, tennis shoes, and a shirt every day. It's like when you're super confident in who you are as a person, the need to feel impressive to others is non-existent. Like I know who I am. I have enough self-awareness to be proud of who I am, and I don't have to like wonder what people think about me. I just simply present myself confidently and accordingly, and then the people that are drawn to the vibe and the persona that I put off, that's mutual. You know, like when you're not so worried about what people think and you're just simply living your life to the fullest because you're proud of who you are and you love the life you're living. I mean, people can like pick up on that instantly. They see it in the spark in your eye. They see it in the vibe you put off. And honestly, it's so much less exhausting because you don't have to constantly be masquerading around as somebody you're not. I mean, the people that are doing the whole fake it till you make it concept, like that's super popular in the business terminology, that like you got to just fake it till you make it. Like I'm all for living life as if you were, like if you are not where you want to be, then live life like you were there. There's probably a better way to say that, but like, you know, put into action the person that you want to be, because that will replicate and become that person. But not to the extent that you're having to masquerade as somebody that you're not. Right. And, you know, it took me a long time to have enough self-awareness to be able to do that. But now that I do, it's like, it's liberating because I don't have to expend so much energy being somebody that I'm not. And people know if they're in that spot still. And I think we all probably go through that spot at one phase or another, in the beginning especially. But getting to a point where you don't have to do that that's where you want to be, for sure.
There's that, it's a meme, and it's Jay-Z when he was like broke, and he had like all the fake chains and like all the fake bling, you know, wearing a fake Rolex and stuff, trying to create this persona. And then it shows him now he's worth, you know, billions of dollars, I guess. And what's he wearing? A black t-shirt or a black, you know, long sleeve kind of t-shirt, zero jewelry, just very subtle. And like you said, that's where you're at when you're at this place of feeling confident. You don't have to feel this idea of putting on airs for other people. And frankly, the people that are, you know, judging you or whatever it is, their opinion doesn't matter anyway. The people that are trying to push stuff on you the hardest are the ones that actually matter the least. So if you don't like what I wear, that's great. Like I was telling you, it's like Ed Milet and Andy Frisella talk about that in Arete. They were like, the people that have suits are hired and paid by the guys that wear the t-shirt and the jeans. Andy's talked about where he just wears like a black t-shirt, jeans, and like, you know, black Converse. He'll get in his Lambo with his wife and they'll go have dinner. But if you just saw them walk into the restaurant, you know, he's all tatted up and all this stuff, you'd be like, who's this guy? He doesn't have enough money to even, you know, get a seat here. But yet when people know him, all of a sudden it's like they see him, hey, blah, 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 blah. So it's very much about having that quality over quantity, right?
100%, man. Well, shoot, I know you got a client call coming up. I don't want to take all your day here. Any parting thoughts? What's coming in the pipeline for you, man? Any crazy physical or mental endeavors coming? Yeah,
I'm doing the SealFit Kokoro Crucible event at the end of April, the beginning of May. So that's 50 hours straight. There's no sleep, and what they're doing is it's not Hell Week, you know, by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a simulation for civilians to have sort of that feel. So you're being trained by actual SEALs in real time, and it's everything from cold, you know, ice baths to water torture in the surf, to doing ruck marches all night, to carrying the boats, log PT, you know, and probably a million other things that I'm not even aware of. But that for me, again, this 4x4x48 was a good gut check to show me what I could work on. And I know that, again, I leveled up from doing the 4x4x48 with you just recently. I know that I'll also level up tremendously because I learned about it from Heather Perillo, the one that was on your show. She's amazing. And being in a place after that, I know is going to give me a lot of, what I have found is that the higher that I elevate myself, the better quality clientele I can attract, the better I can serve them. So for me, this is a great way not only to improve myself as a person, but it improves my business, makes me a better father, a better husband, all those things. So that's the big thing that I have chambered right now. I'll be going to see Jocko in July in Washington. It's a thing called the Council, and there's only 20 people invited to it. So you're going to be in the mountains, horseback riding, shooting guns, all the manly things, while learning about leadership, while really truly interacting. And then
that's in July.
July, and then there's my speaking calendar is just about full right now. So after all those things, I'll be traveling a lot doing that and just reaching more people.
I'm going to get you back on the podcast, talk about SealFit and your horseback riding adventures with Jocko.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, man, that'd be good. I mean, I've always respected and appreciated what you brought to the table from a intellectual standpoint, from a mindset and growth mindset standpoint. I mean, you're just a freaking good dude, man. Like, you're a good person. You put off good vibes, and you empower people in ways you don't even know. So keep doing what you're doing, man. Where do people go to find out more about you?
They can hit me up on Instagram, LinkedIn, Marcus Aurelius Anderson, and then they can go to my website, marcusaureliusanderson.com. If you want to inquire about speaking, that's cool. If you want to inquire about coaching, that's fine as well. The idea is I'm just trying to put out, I'm not on there, 3 times a day like Gary Vee, but what I put out, I try to make it quality over quantity as always. And the goal is just to help people lean into adversity and understand that it's a gift, because it helps you see where your weaknesses is. It forces you to elevate to the level so that you can become the person that you want to, as you were speaking to before. And it's coming either way. So either you prepare for it now. Nothing breeds confidence like preparation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can prepare for adversity now, again, the memento mori kind of idea, it makes you feel more confident knowing that you can, not that it's not going to hurt, but knowing that you're strong enough to endure whatever adversity throws at you.
When I've always wanted to ask you this, but I've never asked you this. When your parents named you Marcus Aurelius Anderson, did they sit you down after you were old enough to comprehend what they were saying about, look, you're going to be this big mindset guy at some point. This is what your name means. This is who you're named after. Just prepare yourself accordingly. How'd that pan out? My
grandfather's the one that named me. I was born on the same day that he was. So that was my father's gift to his father, to name me. And I had no clue who Marcus Aurelius was. When I was 11, I went and bought his book, Meditations. This is back before the internet. I'm 50 years old, guys. And I tried to read the book. And for those of you that haven't read Meditations, it's a journal that Marcus Aurelius kept while he was on the front lines in the Germanic Wars. So it was basically him writing down things like, is this what you so feared? If it's endurable, then endure it. In the first part, the first 2 pages, he's talking about, from my father I learned this, from my uncle I learned this, from this person I learned this. It didn't really read well for an 11-year-old, and it used a lot of the thee, thou, doeth, biblical stuff, and I was like, this is way over my head. I don't even like this guy. What the hell am I named after him about? Because when they would tell me who he was, as a kid, I don't know what an emperor is. They just said he's like a king. And to me, I was like, I don't feel like a king. I actually went by Mark for most of my younger age, because even Marcus felt like it was too much gravity for that name. But through that stoicism, it led me to Taoism, because when I went back to the next day to get a different book by Marcus Aurelius, they're like, that's the only book that he's got. As I'm walking down the philosophy section, I see the Tao Te Ching faced out with the Chinese characters on it, which reminded me of the characters in my martial arts school. I opened that book up, and the first thing that I saw was it's only 83 pages. It's 83 chapters, right? And they're just like little koans almost. And the book, when I opened it up, it said, if you continue to sharpen your blade, it will go blunt. And even at 11, I was like, okay, I get that. That makes sense. So I was able to read that, and that led me to better understand. That became my gateway to understand Stoicism later and Zen. And what I've learned now is that at these higher levels, all these things are teaching the same thing, right? Whether it be a philosophy or religion, the great ones teach certain things without any dogma attached to them. So I didn't really start using the name until after I was hurt, kind of sort of reborn. And frankly, Marcus Aurelius's words and Stephen Pressfield's words, and a lot of these words were going through my mind when I was injured. And it sounds like a bunch of flowery bullshit when you're hurt and you can't walk, and it's like, it's easy for you to say, if it's endurable, then endure it. But once I got to a place where I could find that acceptance, stop denying what was going on, and saying, okay, so what? Now what? If this is my life, and I assume that this is it, what am I going to do now?
It's pretty cool, man.
That's it.
Well, you've certainly earned the name for sure. I mean, I'm sure Marcus Aurelius would be looking up at you and be like, man, I want to be named after this guy.
I don't know about that.
Love it, man. Love what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep being a light out there. And definitely, if you'll listen to this, follow along. Make sure you're following along with his content for sure. And until we meet again, man.
Indeed.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, brother.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you, brother.
See you.